Hello, this is Keith Thibodeaux, and you're listening to Head Smack Podcast.
You are listening to conversations with misfits, mavericks, and trailblazers.
Welcome to another episode of the Head Smack Podcast. I'm excited about today to have a wonderful guest who is known as, by several names actually. He's known by Keith Thibodeaux, but also known as Richard Keith, or most famously known as Little Ricky. Please welcome Keith Thibodeaux to the Head Smack Podcast. Good to have you on, Rick. Keith, I'm going to get messed up myself. How you doing, Keith?
No, I'm doing well. No problemo. It's that's Rick. I answer to Rick too. So
yeah, I'm sure even growing up for the years that you were on I Love Lucy, that you probably answered to Ricky quite a bit, and so people probably didn't even know your real name for a while, right?
That's true. That's very true.
So yeah, great to have you on.
Well, good to be here, and it's exciting to be invited by you. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. So we're going to go ahead and get started a little bit with your early years, because you've had an amazing career, amazing life, full of adventures, full of turning points, full of things that have changed from one thing to another. Of course, you started on I Love Lucy. You moved on to the Lucy and Desi Comedy Hour. You did Shirley Temple's Storybook, which is amazing, the Andy Griffith Show, amongst other things. So tell me a little bit about your start. How does a little kid from Louisiana end up on probably one of the biggest shows of the time?
Well, it all started when I began making noise on trash cans in the backyard of my house in Louisiana. And I was born there, and about 2 years old, I started playing with knives and forks on the kitchen table, and then I went to the backyard when my mom kicked me out of the house. And then the neighbor lady heard me playing on the trash cans, and so it just kind of snowballed from there. And she said, I think you need to buy your son a set of drums because he's got rhythm.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started.
And so you started with playing trash cans. Kids got rhythm. And so how did that transition to making it into a TV show?
Well, I mean, it was a long bit of a process from then. My dad bought me a toy drum, and then I went through that, and then I told my dad I wanted the real drum, and so he bought me a real drum, and then I started playing pretty much with my dad would take me to parades, and I listened to bands, and I listened to the radio, big band stuff on the radio. That was in the 50s. So from that point, I was invited to different organizations like the Lions Club, Kiwanis Club, high school things, as a little drummer boy, as this little kid who had rhythm. So a guy named Horace Height, who was the head of the Horace Height Orchestra and the Swift Premium Hour, which was sponsored by Swift Meats at the time, he saw me in Louisiana, and basically, long story short, signed me to a contract to go on the road and go touring with the Horace Height Show.
Wow.
Across the nation in Canada. So I did that for about a year and a half, with my father quitting his job at United Gas, and he went on the road.
And how old were you at that time?
I was at that point, I was probably three years old.
Wow.
And I saw recently this YouTube thing about Horace Height and me in it, with the famed legendary musician Lionel Hampton.
Wow.
And so it was just a classic. I'd never seen it. And, but it was a little, very archaic video, but it showed how small I was. There I was with my drum set, and he would introduce me as pound for pound, the greatest drummer around. So that was
pound
me.
For pound, the greatest drummer around. I like that.
Yeah, he used to call me Keith Thibodeaux. not Thibodeaux, but Thibodeaux. So I answer to a lot of different names there.
And so, you started this tour and you had an agent, and I guess a something came up that got you the audition.
Yeah, Horsehide had a hiatus in California. That's where his home was in Sherman Oaks. So we all stayed there. The band, we rehearsed there. Uh, the whole show was basically kind of on pause for a little bit. And during that pause, the Isle of Lucy show was looking for a little Ricky for their show to play their son
Mhm.
because they had used a couple of twin boys, infant and toddler boys in that part, um, and then they wanted to expand that whole storyline and bring in a little older little Ricky. And so the fact that I played the drums and I looked like Desi, when I went on the set, Lucy looked at me and told my dad, well, he's cute, but what does he do? And so so she said, there's a set of drums over there. I heard he plays the drums. He can go over there and play the drums. So I went over there and played, and Desi came over, started jamming with me on the drum set, and laughed, and all the technicians came by and started, watching this little kid play the drums. So Desi stood up, laughed, and said that I think we found little Ricky.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Now, did you realize how big of a deal it was, or did your parents? I'm sure your parents did, but you probably had no idea of how big of a thing this was.
No, I mean I'm a kid. I'm
Hmm.
4.5 years old by this time. Maybe just turned 5. I don't know. But it was a it was something that my dad said was very important.
Hmm.
So you have to do good. So I was under pressure, you know, to act my best and to be polite.
Right.
Say yes sir, no sir. I remember calling Lucy Miss Ball because my dad had told her to call her Miss Ball, and she said, after I got the part, she said, no. She goes, don't call me Miss Ball. It's Lucy. Everybody's on a first name basis here. Lucy, Desi, Bill, Viv. So I was put on the same level as these adult actors in that respect. And so later on, I heard that when she did her last television show, I think it was called Life with Lucy or something like that. People on the set would call her Lucy, and she completely reversed by that time. Age had set in. It's Miss Ball to you.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not. It's not Lucy to you. It's Miss Ball.
Right. She had
So that
earned that.
was
She had earned that.
yeah.
Well, and so, so you were on there for, a year, 24 episodes. Then that ended. And then it was the Lucy and Desi hour that lasted another 3 years. And so, what are some of your memories? I know you were pretty young. And so I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but my childhood was not like your childhood. And so yours is
I
captured
hope
in,
not. I hope not.
yeah, yours is captured in black and white on one of the biggest shows of the era, and still a classic that people still get a good laugh at. People still enjoy
Mhm.
because just timeless comedy that was just amazing. What are some of your favorite memories of that? Do you have things that really stood out to you even now as you look back?
Oh yeah. I mean, big things that stand out on my show, on the shows that I did was Superman, George Reeves.
Ah, yes,
The only Superman that I know of, and that's George Reeves, that
yes,
passed away some years ago under auspicious purposes,
right,
and
right.
or anyway, dubious purposes,
Mm,
circumstances. But he came to my birthday party for this episode, and so a lot of people have seen the show and they know what episode that is. And Lucy gets, she tries to be Superman and she's not, and
right,
she ends
right.
up on
With
the
a
ledge
helmet
with a
and
bunch of pigeons and all that whole bit.
yeah.
But I really thought he was super. I met him, and I shook hands with him, looked up at him, and he was just this giant of a guy to me, because a little bitty kid,
Right, right.
that I was. And then in my mind, I just looked up and said, "Gosh, he really is super." Because
That's
in
awesome.
my kid mind, I was
Yeah.
thinking, he was really super. But in my acting mind, I knew that this was an actor.
Right.
So it
Right.
was it was some sort of like reality merging with fantasy at the same time, and but I had to do a job, to
Right.
be
Right.
able
And
to.
then you had your cool little costume as well that you wore, and
Yes, and I took pictures with him, and he
yeah.
was really a cool guy. He was really, you could tell he really liked kids, and I felt that, and gave me a lot of time, of course, and I started jumping off the roof of my home after that, like catapulting
Yeah.
down on the ground, and
Yeah, I think
super
every
cool.
young, yeah, right. I think every kid, especially boys, as soon as they can climb up it, they'll jump off of it, and so
Yeah,
they
yeah,
all think they're Superman, and so getting to meet that classic Superman is amazing, and I love the photo of you with him as well. You
yeah.
can see the admiration you had for him in that meeting. What are some of your memories of Lucy and Desi? What kind of memories have planted in your mind from that meeting them?
It was very, very. It was kind of like a reality and fantasy type of thing with them as well. Because, I mean, I wasn't as much in awe like Superman in that way, but they were definitely Hollywood stars, and they definitely had the life of the rich and the famous, the Rolls Royces, and the Jack Bennies living next door.
Mm.
And I just remember spending, lots of time at their home.
Yeah.
Uh, and
So
with
so they treated you like one of theirs, or I mean, they treated you like family, very kindly. It wasn't a professional type thing, and that's it. Once the cameras are off, we kind of don't care about you anymore. Is that what
No,
happened?
it was they treated me like family. They really
Yeah.
did, and it's kind of amazing to think about that. But I was introduced to their son and daughter, Lucy Jr. and Desi Jr. Um, when I was right when I got on the show, so I was probably just 5. So from that point on, it was like I was a brother,
Mm.
a stepbrother to Desi or and Lucy, and we played together. We spent weekends together. We spent summers together in Del Mar. Went to the racetrack with Jimmy Durante. Gave us tips
Wow.
on horses in the club there, and so it was just an amazing kind of life that was quite different than the life I had back home in the valley. So they lived in Beverly Hills, and
Mm-hmm.
then Beverly Hills is just across the hill to the valley, the San Fernando Valley, which is where the poor folk lived, like me.
Yeah.
But when I was over there, it was like I was part of the family of their family. So
Right.
I got to enjoy the things and chauffeur driven everywhere. We go to the movies and Desi hang out places, we get driven there and go to Palm Springs and this and that. And
That's
it was,
amazing.
yeah, yeah.
And so, after I Love Lucy stopped, you were on there the 24 episodes, then the comedy hour, you're there for, a little time as well. Probably not as much as I Love Lucy, but definitely a part of what was happening there. Then tell me a little bit about Shirley Temple's storybook. What was that like? Well, I know you are probably on there for one episode. Did you meet Shirley Temple? What was that
Mhm.
like?
Well, Shirley Temple had this show that she was an adult by this time, and she had her own show on I believe it was CBS, um, uh, that played different storybooks, storylines, different um, shows that she would do. And in my show, I played an Indian, a little Indian, and this Indian, yeah, it was just kind of
Oh, wow.
random, but I have not that much memory of it. But it was after the I Love Lucy show,
Hmm.
after the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour ended,
Right.
and but truly the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, that was when I was really beginning to mature in my role as Little Ricky.
Yeah.
And that was the last Lucy Desi Fred Ethel format that they filmed, but it was filmed quite different than the early show, which was filmed in front of live audience like
Wow.
a Broadway play.
Right,
And
right.
and so the other was the comedy hour was filmed like a movie, you know, like the Andy Griffith show a little further on in the timeline. When I was on that, they filmed it with one camera, so they filmed the Ala Lucy show with three cameras.
Oh,
So
wow. And that was pretty innovative too.
it was, and you know, Desi did a lot of innovation in that respect. He put the Ala Lucy show on film, so you can watch places like Pluto format streaming and see Ala Lucy shows 24 hours, and they're like
Mm,
spectacular. I mean,
right.
they're it's not like some of the old videos in the 50s that they didn't have the quality, you know. So
Yeah.
he was very innovative. He didn't get a lot of the credit that he should have gotten, and was kind of a little bit of a pariah in California in Hollywood because Lucy was so she was the star, you
Mm,
know, of the show. But Desi was the straight man who, to me, it was like brilliant. Even his acting with
mm.
her and the reactions that made Lucy so funny.
Right, right. People don't understand how important sometimes that is you can have a great performer that's working in an ensemble, but if the people that they're working with don't give them the energy and the feedback and whatever, it's a lot tougher to get the best out of them. And so, the fact that Desi and the rest of the cast could work with Lucy so well, and with
Yeah,
her genius and just her just visual and delivery and timing and everything, and
yeah,
they in their way had their own levels of genius, but just a fantastic ensemble cast. It just really made it work well and made everybody highlighted as a character that just people loved totally.
yeah.
But Desi's innovation definitely made a big difference as well.
Yeah, it was I mean he was an alcoholic, you know, later on in life and you know, being Latin, he was a little didn't know the language. I mean, didn't I should say don't. He didn't speak the language very well
Mm,
as a Latin coming in from
mm,
another from Cuba. So all those things kind of he was a womanizer, and so we can go on and on about that, but that's probably been talked about enough about. But what you were saying about you know that dynamic between people who can really play off one another, the same applies to things like music. If you you know if a great musician is playing with three musicians that are subpar, you know, it's going to affect how that person plays.
right,
And
right.
he's just not going to get the very best. You're going to get the very best of whatever you do when you're around the best.
Right, right. And it just you feed off that energy, you feed off that creativity, that delivery,
Yeah,
that performance, and it just amps up your performance even more. You don't feel like you're kind of fighting against the tide to bring the
right.
best out. And I think that's very evident in the show, is just how well everybody did their roles and did their parts. That
Mm,
it feels easy until you try and do something like that. It looks like it was so easy, and but it's
yeah,
like I think it's just the brilliance of the cast and everything that they did. And even in trying to find you as a little Ricky, Lucy asking, what do you do? Like, what's your
yeah,
special sauce? Like, sure, you're cute, but what's the special sauce that you're bringing to this role? Because we need more than just cute. We don't need pretty. We don't need
yeah.
we want more, and you brought that to the role.
Yeah, I mean, that was a kind of a breakthrough there. You know, to have all the cast. You know, the Lucy Show was funny. It was a comedy, but it was also had music in
Hmm.
it, and so all those parts. If I wasn't able to play the drums or able to participate musically or vocally or anything, that would lose that interest in say
Right,
me.
right.
So the fact that I had the ability to sing, play the drums, dance, you know, like in the Maurice Chevalier episode where Lucy goes to Tijuana on the Comedy Hour show, you know,
Yeah,
those things are things that really help bring it into another dimension, I should say.
Well, and I think what you brought to the role too also then influenced the storyline and influenced the scripting and the segments and things like that, because suddenly they had more
Yeah,
to feed into the creative process of coming up with the shows, because they had somebody that did more than was a cute kid. And so I think that added to the value of the show itself
yeah.
extremely, to have that in you.
Well, the writers were brilliant, of course, and they took all those things in. They took Lucy's her personality, Desi's personality, Bill and Viv and me, all those things were incorporated into storylines. Not that all those things were 100% true all the time, but there were aspects of those things in our personalities, of who we were, our age, our looks, all that those writers, brought in. And then you had the directors, you had the Bill Ashers, who later directed, Bewitched and those kinds of shows. You had some brilliant people that were part of that show, even in lower positions in the background, that became great directors. Jay Sandrich, people who did, big Mary Tyler Moore Show, all those kinds of things later on. This was the kind of group that was there, that was part of that I Love Lucy show. Even the
Yeah.
cameraman, the makeup, Max Factor. I mean, it was like you had the best.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good head smack moment of understanding is, when it comes to creating something successful on the scope of I Love Lucy and the Desi and Lucy Comedy Hour, is the value of having the right people in place. As we talked about, each kind of fed into the other. One character did something that the other one reacted to, and if their reaction was off, then the other person just couldn't get the thing. And so having the right people in place, having the right talent, having the right, this person's great at these kinds of situations. This is, little Ricky is going to be perfect. We need something entertaining with him doing something musically or creatively,
Right.
and we've got him, we've got the
Yeah.
right people in this space.
Yes.
And I think that's important when it comes to any kind of organization or anything you're doing, any kind of creative endeavor, is really sweating some of the details of, who do we have a part of this, and understanding that each thing matters. And just like in your case, Lucy said to you, "You're cute, but what do you do?"
Yeah, but what,
That
what else do you do?
what else do you do apart from being cute?
I mean,
Um, you know,
but really, honestly, I was not an actor. Going into that show, I was a little drummer boy who was on a big band tour. That's basically what I was. I wasn't acting on that show so much, and so I had to learn how to act and learn my lines, and then but it was difficult. It wasn't something
mhm.
that really came easy. That was probably the hardest part of my job, was acting
Yeah. Well, and also in front of a live audience, like,
in front of a live audience with that
yeah.
pressure. I remember uh, my daughter and I went to the first Friends episode. When they
Oh,
first
wow.
came out,
Yeah, yeah.
a friend of mine had worked at CBS, and he was going to give us tickets when I was in town, and so we went over there, and we went. There was another show where they had two twins. What were the two little twin girls?
Oh, is it Full House?
Full House.
Yeah.
So we went to that, and it was such a interesting moment, because the way and that was filmed in front of a live audience too,
Right.
taken off the I Love Lucy show format. Um, and so when the little kid in the show would say a line, they would stop the filming and speak to the little kid and tell him the line, and then he would repeat it back, and then they would film it instead of on at the moment
Right, right.
delivering the lines like I did on the show. So it was like completely different. There was no cue cards for me. I mean, I could hardly read at that point,
Right.
but I mean, and I didn't have, enormous volume of of words that I had to speak,
Right.
but whatever I said, I had to come up with it. And so I
Yeah.
think out of all the filming of the Al Lucy show, I think they had to stop filming like maybe twice out of
Wow.
all the shows that I did
So
with
it's very
Lucy
much
Day.
like a theater production.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
It
there wasn't
was.
any stop and starting, stopping, starting type thing.
Yeah. So like
And
when I did the Babalu episode with Desi, and with the conga drums, and we were
mhm.
going to Cuba, that was filmed live, music, performance, vocals, right there. It wasn't like
Wow.
recorded and then put on and lip synced or something like that. So
Wow.
you had to. There was an energy there, that you have when you have live, um, filming and videoing. But um, it was definitely a very pressurized moment.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure, and I've done a little bit of theater in the past, and when you're in that moment in front of a live audience, there's a certain level of energy mixed with fear, mixed with terror, mixed with
Yeah,
excitement that brings a level of performance that when you know you can stop and start, when I fluff it up, no big deal, I can just redo it again. And so I think that also adds to the performance as well. That I've got to get it right. I've got to think about
mhm,
this. I've got to nail it and keep
mhm,
going. If I mess up, there's no stopping. We just keep going unless it's so bad of a mess up that we've
yeah,
absolutely got to stop the take. But it does add a level of pressure. And so you said you saw Friends the first episode and Full House. I'm sure that was a little bit of deja vu coming back to that and seeing a live show performed. You know, one of the episodes or one of the shows that you did in I think it was '64, the Lucy Show. You did one episode with that where you guys got back together again. Was that the last time that you were in front of an audience with Lucy, or when was one of the last times you got to see Lucy and Desi?
Well, I mean, even after the show ended, when the show ended, I think we had an Ernie Kovacs, the famous actor, and Edie Adams. That was the last television I Love Lucy, or I should say Lucy Dizzy Comedy Hour, and that whole cast broke up from that point. And my dad said I was out of a job at the age of 9 years old, and so I went to the unemployment line, and it was just a weird kind of a moment because I thought that show would go on forever, but
Right.
because of Lucy Desi's and their marriage, it was it was on they were unworkable together in that sense. But it uh, what was your first question again?
Well, the Lucy Show happened in '64.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let me get
Yeah.
yeah. The Lucy had shows after the Out of Lucy show that weren't with Ricky and Fred and Ethel, all those. I think she had Viv in some of those shows, but um, I was evidently on a show playing a random boy on that show, and but that wasn't that was so forgettable. I couldn't even remember that. But
Yeah.
the funny thing about it is that after the show ended, okay, the Lucy Desi show ended, I was out of a job. I still was friends with Desi, and I still was connected to the Arnaz family as family. And
Hmm.
so Desi Jr. and I, he ended up playing the drums because he saw me playing the drums, so he got lessons to play the drums, and then
Wow.
ended up being in Dino, Desi, and Billy, and some of these other things that he did. But we played with the orchestra on the show and did the warm up for the audience for her
Wow.
newest, her latest shows. So the fact that I was on that show, it was just like they just threw me in there, like
Yeah.
like I was just part of the mix of that time.
Yeah. Now, at what point were you aware of the the gravity or the value of being on I Love Lucy and then the comedy hour? Like, was there a point in the middle of it that it hit you how big of a thing it was, or was it like years later that you look back and you're like, oh my goodness, people really liked what I did there or liked that show? At what point did it hit you how big of a deal it was?
I mean, obviously, now you can see it in a better light. Then we were just working.
Yeah.
Then everybody was just working, and nobody really. I mean, who never would have thought that the show would still be going on in 2024.
Right. People
In the
still
way,
love it. People still talking about it. So no, not only were you part of one of the biggest shows of that era, but you're also part of one of another big show of the era, the Andy Griffith Show. And so, how did that come about?
well, the fact that my contract was with Desilu, Andy Griffith was filmed at Desilu Cahuenga Studios. They had three studios: Cahuenga, Gower, which was the old RKO studios, and then Culver City, which they filmed the outside scenes for Mayberry. But the Cahuenga studios, where they filmed the I Love Lucy show, that was part of that Desilu connection that I had. So they got me. Uh, I guess I had to audition for the part of Johnny Paul Jason, who was Opie's best friend
Hmm.
on the show. So that's how I got on that show. And so I was on only about 13 episodes of that, but that was a really totally fun experience for me to be on that show, to kind of get back to my southern roots in a way,
Yeah.
from being a California boy, and then just hanging out with Ron Howard, who at that
Yeah.
time was just a little kid actor like me, and it was just a fun time.
What's your best memory of that? Because, once again, Andy Griffith is just a legendary person, character, went on to make a lot of other, you know, uh, TV shows and things like that. But, in that time, what was it like working with him? What was that experience like? Did you know him before that time?
No, I didn't know him, but he was fabulous. I mean, he was just like he was in the show. The Andy Griffith Show was more like who they are in real life, and the Al Lucy Show was more of acting,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so it was just a whole different. He grew up in the South, as did Don and Ed um, B Benaderet. Yeah, is that B Benaderet? I think was Aunt B's name. So we were all Southern people. Even Ron Howard was born in Oklahoma, which is not really the South, but it's you know
South enough for some
yeah.
some
But
Northerners,
but
yeah.
just some of the memories I had was just hanging out with Ron, going to the commissary, sitting next to Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore in the next booth, eating hamburgers, you know,
Wow, yeah,
playing catch on the lot, that kind of junk. And then, even when I was doing the Lucy Dizzy Comedy Hour, and even after that with Desi, when we would do the warm ups for the audience, playing our drums, we would take bicycles from our set, go down there. We literally cycle and bike through the Star Trek set. The command center,
yeah,
and just we would go down to the prop department. It was just like this big playground, and we'd
yeah,
see King Kong, the original King Kong, RKO. They're the
yeah.
ones that filmed King Kong. So Desilu bought out RKO, and I think now it's like Paramount or something like that has bought it, which was next door to that studio. So it was just this huge playground of sorts that
Yeah,
we as kids could just get lost in and just explore.
yeah. Aside from Superman, were there any other people that you were pretty much in awe of that you got to meet, on the studio, on the sets, on the lots that was an amazing moment for you?
Well, people like I ate, you know, one we ate with David Jansen, the fugitive
Hmm.
character on the original Fugitive series. He came, had dinner with us in Palm Springs. Maurice Chevalier, who was on the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, was a famous French actor, singer. Just being able to hang out with him, and he was French. I was kind of a French name, so I kind
Right.
of felt a connection there, and getting to sing and dance with him was really really pretty cool. And I don't know, there's just so many people that Danny Thomas episode, the actor Danny Thomas. We had a Rusty and Angela Cartwright who played in Lost in Space,
Hmm.
and Rusty Hamer, her um, the boy played her brother. They were on the show, and that was fun.
Yeah.
So it was just and I went to school with Angela. I went to school with Jerry Mathers of the Beaver, and who played the Beeve.
Hmm.
And it
Hmm.
would, it's like you have to get back to real life. And when you
Right.
were in
Right.
real life, you were in real life. And when I went to school, nobody really was saying, "Oh, there's little Ricky." It
Right.
it
Right.
was just like you were just another person.
Right, because
So,
they're either famous or they're children of more famous people than you. So,
but even so, I mean, back in those days, it was so strange. It's like there wasn't that. It was like, oh, okay, he's one of the actors. Yeah, it wasn't obsessed like it is now,
mm, mm,
with celebrityhood and acting and Hollywood. It was a different attitude, I guess.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, and of course, it was about the times were changing. The '60s. You were getting away from the '50s and the big band to the Beatles. You were
right,
getting to the British invasion. You're getting to all these other, um,
right. And
you know,
Elvis was probably eating up a lot of the studio time, making one movie after another.
exactly, yeah, exactly. A little bit, I would say, a little bit.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, it was a cultural change too. So I think that people were it's just a different mindset, I guess.
yeah. And so eventually, you were out of those roles. You did a few things, beyond I Love Lucy, but there was, you joined a rock band. Tell us a little bit about that. And so, there was that time of post Lucy, post, Andy Griffith.
Hmm.
What was that like? Was it you were done with the experience, or they weren't calling you, or what had happened in that transition time between, you know, all the, being used and being on stuff
Hmm.
to moving away from it?
Yeah, it was. My parents divorced or separated. My dad had an affair with a secretary at another studio, and which he was working at Desilu at the time in public relations with George Murphy, the actor, and he became a senator, I believe. So my parents' breakup was a big thing in my life, and that's really when things began to um, sort of be. I was very disillusioned with life, with family, with God, all those different things, and ended up moving back to Louisiana. And it wasn't so much that I was losing acting jobs; it was that I was actually still family with Lucy and them and Desi Jr. And so I was growing up with them as a teenager now. So it was a whole different um, time and culture, I should say. And when that happened with my parents, my mom just took us, all our family, our kids. So I was the oldest of six kids, moved back to Louisiana, and was at my uncle and aunt's house for a while until my mom could find a job. Um, so they were, really kind to take us in, of course. And at this time, I was a junior in high school, so I went back to. I was attending a Catholic school in California, a boys' school, Notre Dame, in the Valley, and I went to Louisiana, and I was in Lafayette High School in Lafayette, Louisiana. So it's a public school, and
Mm.
so that was another jolt to my reality. And it was a
Did people there
whole.
know who you were?
They did, yeah, yeah, and that was part. Some people, really gravitated toward me, and I began to get, you know, I don't say popular, but known, and uh, and then I began to be in bands like in high school, playing the drums, and we had a little band called the Persian Market. And that Persian Market, we were playing in Biloxi, Mississippi, at the Vapors Club, which is a very kind of was a famous '60s club, and had people like Little Richard, Jimi Hendrix, the Allman Brothers when they were called Almond Joy. They were all playing this thing. But a band called David and the Giants was the house band. So I got to meet them, and they were, this established older kind of a really cool band with hair down to their way down there,
Right, right.
and walking around with mace, to make sure there wasn't any stray truck drivers that were going to cause any trouble in the Waffle House, and calling them a sissy because they had long hair. But so that band that I was in high school, um, I met David and them when I was 16 years old, sat in with them, and they asked the club manager, who was that little kid who played drums with us? And the guy said, that was little Ricky. So that established the beginnings of a relationship between me and that band. And so they would come to town in Louisiana, and I'd hang out with them. And then I would play in clubs in Lafayette and little rhythm and blues clubs and things like that. And they would come and hear me after they played somewhere. And one day David called me and said, "Hey, we'd love to get you, to play drums with us if you like." By this time, I was 19 years old, and I took the bait. I left Louisiana. I was at that point doing marijuana and drugs and LSD and all these crazy things that my friends did at the time, and I ended up just leaving home and moving to Mississippi, and began to play with this rock band, David and the Giants. And so, I did the sex, drugs, rock and roll. This was what I was dreaming everything was going to be, But I had very, I guess, emotional problems and definite sin problems at that point. But it just got down to where I was with David and playing, and they had a contract with MGM and United Artists. They played up in New York, Florida, everywhere. We even had stuff that was popular in the UK. A couple of secular songs, 10 Miles High, Super Love, songs like that were got kind of cultish up there for the Northern Soul sound. But all these things, I just began to get depressed, and what is, I guess, now known as clinical depression and schizophrenic. I would hear voices in my head. Um, I'd be driving a sports car down the interstate, you know, and just say, "Why don't you just go ahead and just turn off the turn off the road here and just smash into a tree?" Nobody cares
Mm,
about you.
wow.
It was just so demonic. And you know, a couple of years from 1969 to 1974, this is what my life was, and it just began to get worse and worse and worse. I had no joy in playing drums. I had no joy in anything at that point, and I
Yeah.
began to cry out to God one night. I was raised a Catholic, and I said, "God, if you're real, save me out of this mess that I made in my life." Because I had dated witches, I did this and that, I got into interest into the occult and astrology and Ouija boards. All these things began to sort of like converge upon me
Mm,
to where it
mm.
was like I'd be in I'd be in stores and I would be just getting, you know, freaked out just being in a store and
Wow.
walking around and paranoid. I was just a mess.
Right.
But God heard my prayer that night. I said, if you're real, God, if you're real and you saved me out of this mess that I made out of my life, I'll serve you. And I just
Wow.
went to bed, woke up the next day, went on my business. And about 2 weeks later, my mom, who had been attending these charismatic meetings in Lafayette, and they were actually Catholic charismatic meetings,
Wow.
uh, receiving the Holy Spirit and healing people, laying on of hands, people with diseases would be healed. It was just really a amazing thing. People, and here is another thing. That was a place that I saw a couple that were playing music um, to Jesus, and it
Hmm.
was just like worship songs, that kind of thing, very simple stuff. But I was thinking, wow, this is cool. And they were like hippies, looking people. And I was
Hmm.
thinking, gosh, wow, you can use music for the Lord. But long story short, I had a book called Life After Lucy that I wrote about some of the experiences I had with the Lord and how He revealed Himself, God revealed Himself um, to me. And I had a vision of Jesus, and it just changed my life. Went back to the band, David and the Giants, told them that there was more to God than what men had led us to believe. And I said, we got to change the lyrics of our song and change them to more godly lyrics. And so at that point, they thought, well, here's another. What kind of drug is this? Is this guy on now? You'll be fine, Keith.
Yeah.
Just
You'll get over
hang
this. You'll get over
hang
this.
in there, Keith. You'll be fine. This will pass. This too will pass. Um, it didn't pass. I kept talking about Jesus. Witness to the lead singer, David Huff of David and the Giants. He eventually came to the Lord and has, you know, credits me for, but it's really Jesus, for
Right.
introducing him in that way to the Lord. And then his brothers came to the Lord. And then, uh, and then we became a Christian band, sort of a pioneering Christian band in the late 70s, early 80s. Now, all through the decade of the 80s, we
Right.
played
Right.
Christian, pop.
Yeah, that was quite a impact on the Christian music market to have a rock band. Did you guys still have the long hippie hair at that point?
Well, actually, that was, they found the Lord in a Pentecostal church.
Mm.
So I didn't. I found, the Lord found me in a Catholic charismatic church. So I was of a kind of a different sort.
Right.
Um, but they didn't have, they started out with long hair. And
Hmm.
then, being in a Pentecostal church, it was like, okay, you got to cut that hair. You got to, we can't be even playing that rock music in this church because that's
Yeah.
not God's music. We got to, you know. So back in 77, 79, it just wasn't a normal thing for
Right.
a rock guitar to be in the church.
Right. Right.
So it, God used certain circumstances. This pastor who we connected with, Brother Morgan, he had a prophetic word that he was going to be involved with a band that was going to be um, you know, be before thousands of people, and that the Lord was going to use it for His glory. So we just saw that it was a biblical mandate to praise the Lord with music,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so we just did. We with the high sounding cymbals, with the guitar, with with music, with your voice, praise the Lord. So
Right.
we just did it in an innocent kind of way and just started that way, and then became a little bit more well known and began to play the big festivals around the United States, the Christian festivals, and we're playing with people like Petra and some of these other Whiteheart and Randy Stonehill and all these different DeGarmo and Key,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and it sounds like, another, big aha moment for you was, when you realize that, all the experience you had with the music and with the songwriting and the abilities, that it was not something that needed to be thrown away after your conversion. That you saw those two people singing and you realized, wow, I can actually use, you know, my skills and my talents and my abilities, however rough they are, and maybe there's not even a place for them right now, but I can still use them for God and for worshiping Him and for serving Him. And that was I think that was quite a moment for you, right? Where because you probably had that wrestle of angst of, I love music and I love playing music and I love being part of this band, but now I'm know Jesus as well. Where do I go from here? Like, do I have to give it all up? And so, it seems like that was for you a big transition point of understanding, that you don't have to give it all up, that there are
Yeah.
some things that can be redeemed and used,
Yeah. And,
right?
to be honest with you, I was thinking it was going to be a secular David and the Giants, and we were going to continue to play in clubs and play more of this godly music, that we would write and that it would be original. And David and them, uh, they didn't see it like that at the time because they were not believers
Mm.
in that sense. And so it was just I finally left and the band, and then they all, came to faith, and then called me and asked me to join them as a Christian band. And so that was part of that. I said,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Absolutely. That's where my heart's at. Well, we are going to be wrapping up here. This has been an incredible conversation, and it's not even the end of your story. You guys are still touring. You're still out there rocking for Jesus. You also work with your wife closely on Ballet Magnificat. You've done that for the last couple of decades, ministering to, dancers all around the world. You do intensives.
Mhm.
Tell me, briefly a little bit more about what you're doing with Ballet Magnificat, and what has that story been like, and what has that journey been like?
Well, I married my wife, which was a blessing of the Lord. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and favor from the Lord.
Right?
So I got favor when I married my beautiful wife, Kathy. We've been married 48 years coming up on. So praise the Lord for that. But, she's a ballet dancer. And she was a very famous ballet dancer who won a silver medal in the second U.S. International USA competition, ballet competition. And so she was with the Mississippi Ballet here in where we live in Mississippi as a professional dancer. And when I came to faith, after I came to faith, I married Kathy, and she came to the Lord, and she was still dancing, but she was not. Um, we kind of played around with the vision that she could use her dance for the Lord too, because we saw in Psalm 149, praise the Lord with the dance, praise Him with the high sounding cymbals, music, and all these other things. So it was
Boy,
like
that scripture was just for you guys, right? The
it was
dance and the high
exactly
sounding cymbals.
it mirrors our kind of our life in a way.
Yeah.
And so eventually, Kathy, after a couple of years, she had a few prophetic words too that she was going to be used as a pioneer in the dance. And, she was still dancing in the world of ballet. But one day, I mean, it came that she said, oh, I think it's time. So she resigned from her job, and it hit the front page news of the Jackson Clarion Ledger here in town. And the president for Belhaven College, which is a local Christian college, called and said, I read the story that you want to use your dance for the Lord. We'll open up studio space and office space for you if you'd like to use Belhaven for that. So we started out very small at Ballet Magnificat, and it was just dancer came here and there, and it was just one or two dancers. We didn't know what we were going to do. Nobody ever heard of dancing in the church. And so
Hmm.
that was a whole other moment that we broke through a wall in that way through the Lord that
Yeah.
gave us that vision to do that. I remember asking a pastor one time before Kathy resigned. I said, "Do you think that?" And he was in Fort Worth playing with David and the Giants, and I said, "Do you think that you know uh, the church is ready for like ballet in the church?" And he thought real hard, just kind of had a slightest smile and said, "Well, I don't think we're ready for that yet, Keith." You
Wow.
know, and so it was just kind of a downer moment. But if God gives you a vision for something, and you see that it's biblically true and that it's there, you need to follow that vision. You need to keep that vision will never leave you until you complete that vision. So that's kind of what happened to Ballet Magnificat, and now it's basically known as uh, America's premier Christian ballet company. And we've established a school here, a training program, professional company that tours all over the U.S. and over 50 countries now. We established a Ballet Magnificat uh, satellite in Brazil, and we have a school,
Wow.
a training program, professional company there too.
And then you
And
have an
so,
intensive every year that ministers to, hundreds of people that come in from all over the world, right?
yeah, you know all about that, don't you?
Yeah. I've got to speak at it a couple of times. It's just an
That's
amazing thing. And, you're looking at your story, you've been a part of so much groundbreaking opportunities, both, in television with I Love Lucy. Andy Griffith was just an amazing show that people still love. I mean, my kids got into it. It's just
yeah,
an amazing
great
show.
show, great
A lot of
show.
things to learn from. Just great, family and all of that stuff. Then you went on to David and the Giants. Once again, innovation there with following your passions and all of
Yeah,
that, bringing a style of music that people weren't quite used to and might not even been ready for. And then, of course, Ballet Magnificat. And so it's just been amazing talking to you and just hearing about how your life has been impacted by all these opportunities and how you've made an impact and been a part of things that have impacted not only the church but culture as a whole. And so it's been a great conversation with you, Keith, and I appreciate you coming
thank you.
on. And I'm sure those that have listened probably liked the reminiscing, but also hopefully inspire them with some head smacks on how they can impact their culture and how they can make some decisions to move forward with some things that might not be what everybody else is expecting. And like that pastor told you, maybe the church isn't ready for ballet. But there are some things, I think there are some creative people out there. I think there are some innovative people out there that need to pursue those passions because, people are not always ready for innovation. And one of the
Yeah,
things I've always said is everybody wants to be innovative until they're asked to be first, and then it's like, well, I don't want to be the first, but I want to
yeah,
be innovative. And
yeah.
so, you being a part of a lot of that through everything that you've done is just amazing. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
It's all been God, Paul. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, man. And this has been awesome. And I really do believe that one good idea can change everything. And so I think you've shared a lot of great insights, and I appreciate you. And thank you so much. Have a great day.
God bless.
Take
Thanks.
care.